I'm back in the other project, so not in the cloned project, so to say. And in this lecture, I want to dive into deleting branches and commits. We had a look at this concept in the third course module already, where we had a look at Git. But now we have all this GitHub stuff and these remote branches and all the commits that might be public. So how can we now get rid of these? Well, first, let's have a look at our current structure from a branch perspective. So all our branches are in here, you know that concept. And as you also saw in the earlier lectures, we have one local tracking branch here, and we have a local branch with feature and a local branch with master. So if we check out our remote repository with git ls remote like this, you see that we have, well, some other branches here in our remote repository. Therefore, let's first get started with git fetch origin to bring back the initial state to our local environment here. So now with git branch -a, you can see all branches, all remote tracking branches we have. So what we could do now is we could delete the local feature branch. As we saw up here, this branch is not connected at all to any tracking branch. So if we just say git branch -d feature like this, well, then this branch was deleted. No big issue here because we just deleted it locally, as you can see here. The tracking branch is still available, so we can recreate one, no problem. What if we want to delete the remote tracking branch too? So this feature branch here maybe. Let's give it a try with git branch -d. And now simply, well, kind of copy paste this right here. Let's see if this works. No, doesn't work. It cannot find this branch, so we can give this also another try with git branch -d, like origin feature, something like this. You see, this is not working. But we have another command to do that, and this command is again git branch, but now --delete --remotes, because we want to remove a remote tracking branch, and now origin/feature. With that, if we do this, you see this remote tracking branch was deleted. With git branch -a, we see this branch is no longer available. But if we check our remote branches, you see that the feature branch is of course still on GitHub. So we now deleted a local branch, we deleted a remote tracking branch. How can we delete now a remote branch? Well, this can also not be done with git branch -d, because to interact with GitHub, we have to push or pull, right? In this case, we have to push. And what do we want to push? Well, we want to push to our origin. And now we want to delete again. So --delete, just as we did it for our remote tracking branch. And now the branch name. So this is just feature. We're referring to a branch in origin, so it's a remote branch. And with that, if we confirm this, it can take a few seconds. But if we do this, we deleted this feature branch. And if we again list all our remote branches, you see that the feature branch is gone. This is how you can delete branches. By the way, if you scroll up a bit right here, you see we also have this feature remote branch here, for example, which is also here available as a remote branch. If you delete a remote branch, so with git push origin --delete, and now the branch name, so in this case feature remote, for example, if you do that, you see that, well, the branch is gone, right? So git ls remote, so it's no longer here. But if we now check all our remote tracking branches too, you see this branch is also gone. So that's very important. We don't have a direct connection between our local branch and the remote branch, but if you delete the remote branch, the remote tracking branch will also be deleted because, well, what should it track? It doesn't have any remote branch that is available anymore. So this is it with deleting branches here. However, if we, for example, go back to our master here and check the log, you see that we have some commits in here. How can I now undo such a commit? Well, the answer is by simply resetting the head as we learned it in Git actually. There is just one important thing here. If you reset the head and push this change then to the GitHub repository, this can of course affect the work of others if you work together with other people. So use this very carefully, same thing for the branches, but you can do it. And how does it work? Well, we can simply say we want to reset in a hard way our head and we want to go back one commit as we learned it, like this. Now the commit was removed. And with that, we can simply say git push origin master like this. And if we confirm this, and we now get a warning because we are now behind our remote counterpart, of course. Why is this happening? Well, because we deleted a commit locally. Therefore, well, we are behind it. But if you force this, so if you say git push -- force origin master like this, then we have updated our remote branch. And if I now say git pull origin master, so to get the latest version from our remote repository, you see that this branch is up to date, so we deleted this commit. But as I said, you also get the big warning hints here. Be very careful when using things like this, but this is how you can, in the end, delete commits. This was a very important module. In this module, we learned lots of the core concepts behind GitHub, and specifically we had a close look under the hood of GitHub to really understand how the connection between Git and GitHub actually works. Let me give you a quick summary about some of the concepts we learned. So we had Git and GitHub, and what we learned was all related to the repository or to branches. In a repository, we have a local repository on Git and a remote repository on GitHub. To establish a connection between these two, we can use this git remote add origin URL command. With that, both repositories are able to communicate with each other somehow. However, the main data interaction happened with our branches as we saw it. Branches were local tracking branches on Git or remote tracking branches. On GitHub, well, we only had the remote branch. With these three branch types, we were able to do our entire interaction between the local data and the data on GitHub. Important commands we had were git branch -- track, then the branch name we want to have, and then the remote tracking branch we refer to. This created a so-called local tracking branch. We had a very close look at what this means and why it's very useful. We also learned that with git pull and push, we can always update information from the remote branch in the local branch or push changes from our local branch into that remote branch. These are actually the core things you have to understand when working with Git and GitHub. As you saw, the usage of GitHub with the commits you can create and all those things is actually the same that we saw on Git, just with a graphical user interface. But these differentiations between these two tools are very important to keep in mind.